everybody? It's Mr. Wagstaff. So we're going to hop right into it today because when I recorded this lesson, it was so long, it was too long to make it one lesson. So here is the second part of the lesson on the civil rights, and I think you guys will enjoy it. There are three very famous assassinations that happened in the 1960s. So we're going to reference them, all right? But you got to know the order and for them to make sense, all right? So there's a president named John F. Kennedy, all right? John F. Kennedy comes out, and we're going to talk about him more tomorrow. John F. Kennedy comes out, and John F. Kennedy supports equal rights. This actually makes John F. Kennedy very unpopular. So he comes out, hey, he's a young guy, great, we'll talk about the things people like about him. Then he's like, I think black people should be treated equal. Popularity goes down. Like that, this is in the 60s, all right? Not that long ago. Saying I think black people should be treated equal as white people, popularity goes down nationwide for that, all right? So I don't want to make it out like there weren't racism everywhere. So he says, I think black people should be treated equal, popularity goes down. In 1963, 3 years, so he becomes president from 60 to 1963. He is assassinated in 1963. He is shot with a rifle, and we'll discuss it when we get there. He is assassinated. When he is assassinated, his vice president takes over, Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson's from the South, probably wouldn't care a whole bunch about civil rights in general, but once JFK is killed, now everybody likes the idea of civil rights since that's what JFK liked, and everybody likes a president after they get killed. All right. So John F. Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson is in a position to pass this thing called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Lyndon B. Johnson's like, I don't know, man. Like, and this is the big hammer, says, I don't care who you are or what you do, you can't discriminate against people. All right. Like, this is the big hammer. There's been push. Martin Luther King Jr. has been like, hey, we got to pass the Civil Rights Act. And Johnson's like, I don't know, man. Like, that's just, it's going to be politically unpopular. I don't know. And then something happens that kind of forces Johnson's hand. There's this guy named Medgar Evers. That's a man's name. He's married, has two kids, or at least one kid. He's a black man in Mississippi. All right. He is the NAACP secretary in Mississippi. It means he's a high-ranking official in this small town in Mississippi. That's very racist. So he is he's like a one-man show in this town. So everybody in town, all the white people are like, oh, we don't like you because you're trying to get equal rights. Medgar Evers one day leaves his office from downtown Mississippi town and drives home and pulls into his driveway and gets out of his car, and his wife and child are coming out to meet him as he's getting off work. There's a white supremacist guy in the lot next door, so he's probably not 100 yards away, probably not even that much, who kills Medgar Evers, shoots him and kills Medgar Evers in front of his family. So Medgar Evers, black man, killed in front of his family. Byron De La Beckwith is the guy who shot him. All right. The police show up. They arrest Byron De La Beckwith at the scene. Byron De La Beckwith's like, here's his rifle, fingerprints all over it. He's like, I did it. You know, whatever. It's horrible. Makes national news. Well, Byron De La Beckwith goes on trial for murder. And then when he gets on trial, he's like, didn't do it. I mean, there's 100% evidence that he did it. He has an all-white jury. You're innocent until proven guilty in America. In the trial, I mean, it's an open to shut case. They go try to find him guilty, come back and say, we're a hung jury, which means at least one of those people in that jury refused to say that he's guilty. It's a hung jury, so the case gets thrown out. They do it again. Another hung jury, which means at least one person on that all-white jury decided he's not guilty and refused to vote him guilty. When that happens, Byron De La Beckwith goes free. The black community in the South goes ballistic. Understandably so. Because had this been a black assassin who killed a white person in front of their family, they probably would have never even made it to the getting arrested stage before they're murdered. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And the black community goes ballistic. Once Johnson realizes, oh my gosh, President Johnson at the time, he's like, okay, this is insane. So Johnson, because of the eruptions that take place in the South and so black people start thinking the system don't work for us. we got to be more aggressive. And we're going to talk about Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael and some of these other guys that come out at this time period, because it clearly looks like the system, it is not designed for black people at all. So let's fight against the system. This was when Johnson realizes he's got to do something or he's going to lose a big part of the population. So after the assassination of Medgar Evers and the 2 hung juries, Johnson, who typically, I don't want to throw Johnson on the bus, he does pass it, passes the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is the big hammer. This says, for no possible reason can you discriminate against people based on their race. You just can't do it in America. There's not going to be a law that does it. There's not going to be an amendment. There's not going to be a local law, nothing. So while not everybody falls in immediately, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is still referenced today. You can't discriminate against people based on age, sex, religion. You can't do that. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the huge hammer that Johnson passes after all this tension after the assassination of Medgar Evers. This is a picture of, this is Lyndon B. Johnson, all right, who the next year when everything blows up, signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's what he's signing here. And you see Martin Luther King Jr. here behind him. Now, while this is going on, there's a whole nother issue. The reason black people can't, like places like Mississippi, perfect example, and this is what Freedom Summer is. There's more black people in Mississippi than there are white people. However, black people aren't voting. They're like 2% of the turnout. And the belief ends up being black people don't want to vote. All right. So there's going to be an election in November. So it's called Freedom Summer. All right. So in 1964, there is a huge motivation to prove to the rest of the world that black people want to vote in Mississippi. All right. So, but black people don't even try to vote because they have these literacy tests and all these things that keep black people from being able to vote. So there's a huge movement in Mississippi, all right, in the summer of 1964 to see if we can get every single black person to attempt to register to vote. See how many get turned away, all right? So every black person needs to go attempt to register to prove to the world that black people want to vote. They're just not being allowed to. So it gets crazy. So there's a couple of things they do in Freedom Summer to prove to the world how the white people have kept black people from voting. Not only is there massive pushback to black people trying to attempt to vote, to register to vote in Mississippi, but like when everybody goes up to vote, they literally have like a 5% amount of the black people that are able to vote. Like it's a staggeringly low number that like pass the test that white people don't have to take in order to vote. Then I always think this one's impressive. They have their own election. Black people, it's a fake election. It's a fake election, but they have their own election to see who do they want for president. More people vote in their fake election than vote in the actual real election. When I say people, more black people voted, because only black people voted in the fake election. More people voted, the black people voted in the fake election than did white people in the real election. To prove black people want to vote. We just can't. They won't let us. And Freedom Summer is a lot of hostilities in the South because the South realize they're being called out and the rest of the world's like, yeah, that's some bullcrap. Or the rest of America's like, that's some bullcrap. We got to fix that. And it's going to lead to the Voting Rights Act of 1965 the next year that says, yeah, poll taxes, literacy test, grandfather clauses, all that junk, throw that out the window. You cannot do anything that stops somebody from being able to vote. Like complete bullcrap. And the Freedom Summer that happened in Mississippi was a huge part of that. Should have a video here. Yes, this is Morgan Freeman.
Before the 1964 presidential elections, hundreds of volunteers, white and black, traveled to Mississippi to help register black voters. It would later become known as Freedom Summer.
Well, in Georgia and Mississippi, you had to pass a so-called literacy test. On one occasion, a man was asked to give the number of bubbles in a bar of soap.
Despite the efforts of civil rights workers, not enough new black voters are registered to have an impact on the presidential election. Johnson wins the election by a landslide, but it's clear he's lost voters in the South, a fact noted by black leaders.
Martin Luther King Jr., he had a conversation with President Johnson, and he said, we need a Voting Rights Act.
Johnson says, well, I'm for voting rights, but this ain't the time.
But civil rights leaders don't want to wait. In the spring of 1965, they pressured Johnson to act, staging a nonviolent march in the little-known town of Selma, Alabama.
In Selma, Alabama, we lined up in twos to walk from Selma to Montgomery to dramatize to the nation that people of color wanted to register to vote. We came to the apex of the Edna Pettus Bridge, crossing the Alabama River. On the other side, you saw a sea of blue, Alabama State Troopers.
Advance toward the group, see that they turn around and disperse.
We saw these men putting on their gas. They came toward us. Beating us with nightsticks and bull whips, shrimping us with horses, releasing the tear gas.
A lot of white Americans were on the fence on civil rights. Then they saw those pictures on television from Selma. That was something new and horrible. It converted a lot of Americans.
Johnson clearly saw that march as something that would help him get the Voting Rights Act passed.
So it's there's a movie out recently called Selma, which came out a couple years ago. Fantastic. Talks about that exclusively. It's really, really good. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965 banned all literacy tests at the polls, made it nearly impossible for local governments to keep people from voting after this. There's a picture right here. This is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This is Martin Luther King Jr. shaking hands with Lyndon B. Johnson. All right, so it looks like it's going well, but there is a whole nother side to this that is important. There's a lot of black people that are like, oh, so to get change, I have to not only been discriminated against for the last 100 years, but I have to go out and get beat up in the street, so maybe the white people can come tell the other white people, don't be so mean to them anymore. That was a very dominant mentality, and understandably, I feel like in that situation, I don't know. The nonviolent people are a very, very strong-willed group of people, and sometimes I can be pretty stubborn. So putting myself in that time period, in that situation, I don't know who I would have sided with more, but there's a lot of people in the African-American population that's like, no. I'm a human. I deserve to be treated with respect, and I'm going to be treated with respect. I'm going to do what the right thing to do is, and if somebody has a problem with me, screw them. All right. And it is this demand to be treated as an individual. It is a refusal to allow yourself to be treated as a second-class citizen so that they might like you better. So there are some people that came out. Malcolm X is probably the most famous that came out. So there is a huge movement called the Nation of Islam, like black Muslims that move into Islam at the time. The leader of the Nation of Islam religion is a guy named Elijah Muhammad. He's not a great speaker, but he is a very good religious leader. So he uses Malcolm X, who is a young, very charismatic man. I got a picture of Malcolm X here somewhere. This is a picture of Malcolm X. Young, very charismatic man to be the face of the Nation of Islam. All right. So the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X says black people are going to do what's right for black people. And we're not going to go looking for any problems with white people, but if white people attack us, we will fight back because we have a right to do that. All right. Just like if a black person attacked a white person, you would expect a white person to fight back. Black people should also have the same right to fight back. So it's a much more aggressive, we know we're being treated as second-class citizens. We are no longer going to acknowledge that. We're going to do things our way, the way we want to, and we will fight back if you have a problem with it. All right. Huge movement in the Nation of Islam. Now, what happens with Malcolm X is he becomes a devout Muslim, makes a pilgrimage to Mecca. When he learns a lot more about Islam and learns that Islam is actually very much a non-violent religion. So he comes back, and he's been in the limelight for years now, and he comes back and says, hey, y'all ain't gonna like this or not. But that Martin Luther King Jr. guy, he might have been onto something. Nonviolence is probably the way to go, because Islam is not, we're not supposed to be violent, so we should go with the nonviolent way. He is assassinated. He is murdered on stage, I'm going to put in quotes, by his own people They just run up to the front stage, and he is murdered on stage in front of his own people when this happens, and it is baffling. I got a video clip of Denzel Washington plays a movie of Malcolm X, and it's a video clip from that movie when this happens. There is a huge conspiracy theory, and there may be something to this, to where the United States government infiltrated his movement and like encouraged him to be. It seems crazy when I say it out loud, but if you go look up the conspiracies behind Malcolm X's assassination when he is murdered, there is a lot of questions that maybe the United States government had something to do with it, because if he's encouraging 13% of the population to not follow the government, anyway. So there's Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael, as the leader of SNCC, began the Black Power movement. So the Black Power movement is the idea, it's kind of like a more aggressive Harlem Renaissance, like embrace black culture. We don't need white culture. Black culture is what we need. Famously, and I think it's all in the video clip too. So famously in the Olympics, there are two black athletes for America. They're running for the American flag. All right, they get first and third place. I believe it's in the 200-meter dash. When they play the national anthem, they put their heads down and hold their fists in the air, which is the Black Power symbol. All right, you think Colin Kaepernick taking a knee in the NFL freaks people out? How about in the Olympics when the dude that just won gold in third place refused to look at the flag and hold their fist up at this time period? The Olympics are furious. They're going to strip their medals from them for this disrespect. When they come back, though, people like Stokely Carmichael embrace this. They're like, absolutely, you're doing it for black people, that we don't need to be treated like this. But there is a very good boxer named Cassius Clay. All right. Cassius Clay becomes the heavyweight champion boxer at the time. He is part of Nation of Islam and will change his name to the name that you've probably heard of before, of Muhammad Ali. So Muhammad Ali, the boxer, started out Cassius Clay, and because of Malcolm X and this movement, he changes his name as well. The Black Panthers, whole different category. The Black Panthers are the Black KKK. Black Panthers go out looking for violence to attack police officers and murder people. The Black Panthers, not a whole lot. The Black Panthers provide food and like daycare programs and stuff for black children. So they probably have more redeeming qualities than the KKK. But once you support the premeditated murder of other people, I feel like that just resets you to zero. It's like multiplying by zero. Like even though the Black Panthers had good qualities of them, the premeditated murder of people on racial grounds really resets you to zero, like the KKK. But they did do positive things for communities, though they did murder people as well. All right.
Late in the afternoon of February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X approached the podium at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem. Betty and their 4 children looked on.
Assalamu alaikum.
Get your hand out of my pocket! Get your hand out!
Brother, please, hold on.
That's from a movie. That's not real footage. This
Malcolm was
is.
rushed to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital across the street. 15 minutes later, he was pronounced dead.
The political turmoil of the late 60s affected almost every aspect of life in America, even sports. The world heavyweight champion in 1965 was a 23-year-old athlete named Muhammad Ali. After winning the title in '64 from Sonny Liston, Ali, a black Muslim, had changed his name from Cassius Clay. In May of '65, Ali was defending the title in a rematch with Liston. Ali bragged he could float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. A short right jab to the chin knocked Liston to the mat. Liston was stunned before the first round was over. The '68 Olympics in Mexico City were also surrounded by controversy. When the Olympic Committee voted to allow white athletes from South Africa to compete, black athletes from the United States and 32 African nations threatened to boycott the games. The committee reversed its decision, and the boycott was called off. 2 American athletes, John Carlos and Tommy Lee Smith, won gold and bronze medals in the 200-meter dash. Their Black Power protest during the awards ceremony provoked more controversy, but many still considered them heroes.
That's for Tommy.
Upon their return, they were honored at special ceremonies at Howard University in Washington. And Black Power advocate Stokely Carmichael expressed the sentiment of many black Americans.
What we want to say is that we don't have a big speech. We want to let the United States of America, we want to let the whole world know that we are going to pick our heroes from today on. And Brother Tommy Smith, Brother John Carlos, and Brother Harry Edwards joins the rank of Brother Muhammad Ali, because we want black people who are concerned with us first and with sport second.
All right, so I mentioned earlier there are 3 super famous assassinations that happened in the 1960s. Medgar Evers is not one of those, even though I then immediately started talking about Medgar Evers being assassinated. The 3 super famous assassinations that happened in the 1960s. The first one in 1963 is going to be of JFK. 1963, JFK is assassinated. All right. In 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. Now, this is kind of crazy with this story with him. So, Martin Luther King Jr., he's organizing a march in Tennessee. And it's kind of interesting on how it works. So Martin Luther King Jr. he gets more death threats than you can possibly imagine, like just all the time. All right. So, and he just brushes them off. He's like, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. Like, I understand. So, very religious man. The night before, and I have a video clip after this of his speech. So he never talks about it, like what happens if he gets assassinated. The night before he's assassinated, he gives a very odd speech. It's like he knows something's going to happen. He's like, look, we're on this march here, and then figuratively, we're fighting for civil rights. Things are getting better. We got a lot more to do. He says, we're going to make it there as a people. I may not make it there with you. First time he ever says that, all right? I may not make it there with you. And he's like, but it's fine. I'm not afraid of any man. I know what happens to me after I die. So I'm not afraid of any man, but we're going to make it there as a people, whether or not I make it or not. He has never said that before. All right. And he says that night. The next morning he wakes up, he's in a hotel, him and a lot of, like his right hand people, that help organize this stuff. He gets up, he walks out on the balcony that morning, and there's a sniper out there, a guy named James Earl Ray, white supremacist, who shoots and kills Martin Luther King Jr. right there. James Earl Ray is arrested. James Earl Ray is put on trial, and he is given life in prison. He has died. He died sometime after 2000. But where you're like, oh, that guy should, get the death penalty. He had to be in solitary confinement because you're the dude that shot the dude that talked about nonviolence. You shot him because he's black. Going to the general population in a prison probably isn't going to work out very well for you. So James Earl Ray's in solitary confinement for the rest of his life before he dies of old age. So here's the thing, though. This is the man that people have been rallying behind. Nonviolence. And then he gets shot in the face and is murdered. So there is a huge swelling, like the whole country's about to explode. And it does. Over 100 cities riot out of anger. So the nonviolence thing doesn't work. All right, fine. And so the whole country erupted. Black communities erupted, just a fury over this man who literally has been talking nonviolence, gets murdered. You can understand the anger in the black community at the time when this happens. So that was the second really important assassination. I want to talk about a guy named Robert Kennedy. So JFK has a younger brother. His name is Robert Kennedy. They're very similar people. So JFK, after he's assassinated, is much more popular because he got killed. So his brother is also a politician. So Johnson is the president, all right? There's a whole other thing going on at the same time called Vietnam. We're going to talk about that next unit. So Vietnam is not going well. Even though Johnson won re-election in 1964, he was finished out the last year of JFK, then won an election himself. He could run for election in 1968. He don't want to. He's like, man, this is garbage. So Johnson's not going to run again. Robert Kennedy is going to run in 1968. Everybody loves Robert Kennedy because Robert Kennedy is this brother of JFK, and it's almost like you get JFK 2.0. So everybody loves Robert Kennedy. So in the 1960s, Robert Kennedy is a very important person because it's almost like he speaks for his brother. Everybody's just waiting for him to get elected in 1968. So he is very much like more of a focal person for the black community than even the president is, because JFK supported civil rights. So Robert Kennedy, this is why he's important here, comes out and begs African American communities not to riot after this. It doesn't help. It's just absolutely pandemonium when Martin Luther King Jr. gets assassinated. Robert Kennedy, all right before the election in 1968, when he is guaranteed to be the president, he is assassinated. That's the third big. He's assassinated in a kitchen in a hotel as he's leaving a speech. A guy named Sirhan kills him. So the three big assassinations are JFK in 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, and then later that year, Robert Kennedy, the brother of JFK, is assassinated. But 100 cities rioted after this. And I got a video clip of Martin Luther King Jr.'s final speech.
And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
On that balcony, I said, okay, we are going. Let's go. And I walked. He was leaning over the rail, talking to Jesse.
And that was it.
Martin Luther King Jr. was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee, shot in the face as he stood alone in the balcony of his hotel room. He died in a hospital an hour later.
This is that picture you just saw, a famous picture of them pointing where the sniper is. This is James Earl Ray, and this was a more recent picture of him, but he is dead now. All right, new look at civil rights. The Kerner Commission is going to come out after this and says inequality is the root cause of urban violence. That segregation and then therefore inequality is the root cause of urban violence. And the Kerner Commission really makes a big connection between violence and crime with poverty. And segregation, which you can still see that today. That poverty is a great indicator of a lot of certain. Anyway, that's a whole nother civics thing. They do pass the Civil Rights Act of 1968. This made de jure segregation illegal and did everything in its power to end de facto segregation as well. All right. You get affirmative action and things like this to try to change the culture a little bit. You start busing. You start doing these other things to try to end the traditional way of separating. Trying to end de facto segregation had varying results depending on how you look at it. But affirmative action came out and is trying to give a leg up to people who have historically been discriminated against to try to even out society. All right, that's as far as we get today. I will see you guys tomorrow.